Leaders from Asia and Africa representing more than two-thirds of the world's population are attending a two-day conference in Jakarta. The event marks the 60th anniversary of a gathering called the Bandung Conference. Rosalind de Bavalia in Jakarta has the details.
We're at the press center set up for reporters at the Asian-African Summit. Crowds of journalists are busy covering the first day of the summit, which has attracted leaders from 80 or more Asian and African countries. Before reporting on the AA Summit, here's an update on the latest development on the sidelines of the conference. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe held talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Relations between Japan and China have improved to some extent through joint efforts made by the people of the two countries. Taking this opportunity, I would like to hear Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's views about the future development of bilateral relations.
I appreciate that relations between China and Japan have been on a recovery path since we met last November. I would like both of us to make efforts to further develop bilateral ties by deepening exchanges and dialogue on various levels.
The leaders discuss ways to improve Japan-China relations, and NHK correspondents say they likely talked about the Chinese push to set up the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The Abe-Xi meeting is the result of careful negotiations through diplomatic channels. The leaders met for the first time last November in Beijing at the APEC summit. Prior to the meeting with the Chinese president, Prime Minister Abe delivered a speech at the summit, and he pledged Japan's efforts toward peace and stability. He also referred to remorse for his country's actions during World War II.
Refraining from acts or threats of aggression or the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any country. Settlement of all international disputes by peaceful means. Those are some of the principles Bandung affirmed. And Japan, with feelings of deep remorse over the past war, made a pledge to remain a nation always adhering to those very principles throughout, no matter what the circumstances.
Abe stressed Japan has been a peaceful nation since the end of the war, and he highlighted its contributions to the development of Asia and Africa. He said nations that have received help are no longer aid recipients, but partners for growth. NHK World's Tomoko Kamata joins us now. So Tomoko, there was a lot of build-up to this meeting between Abe and Xi. How did it go?
Well, the body language seemed to be good. As the leaders greeted each other, they shook hands and smiled. And both said positive things about the state of the relationship. So from that perspective, the meeting was good. Before Abe left Tokyo, he outlined what he planned to say. He said he'd tell Xi that Japan wants to improve its ties with China. And he said he'd advocate going back to the basics of a mutually beneficial strategic relationship. Officials with Japan's foreign ministry say they've been seeing signs that ties are improving. They say things have been getting better since fall when Abe and Xi met face-to-face for the first time since taking office.
Tell us about Abe's speech. Did it meet expectations?
Some thought the speech would be a forerunner to the statement Abe plans to give for the 70th anniversary of the World War II. So leaders of neighboring countries were paying close attention. They wanted to know if Abe would repeat the expressions used by former prime ministers in their anniversary statements. Tomiichi Murayama and Junichiro Koizumi both offered feelings of deep remorse and heartfelt apology for Japan's colonial rule and aggression in Asia. Abe referred to feelings of remorse, but he made no mention of an apology. Government officials say his aim is to focus on the future. That's why he stressed that Japan wants to contribute to peace and development throughout the region.
How have leaders in China and South Korea reacted to the speech?
Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hon Lei commented on the issue at a news conference.
Members of the international society all hope that Japan will look squarely back on its past of aggression in Asia and express remorse.
South Korean officials say they were disappointed. They expected Abe would stick to the wording used by former leaders. Abe has already said he upholds the basic thinking behind comments that previous leaders made on his historical issues. But he said he doesn't think he needs to use exactly the same words. Japanese government officials say they're keen to build better ties with their neighbors by holding more talks at all levels.
Thank you, Tomoko. On the first day of the conference, leaders of Asian and African nations took the podium one after another to call for their voices to be reflected in a new world order. The first Asian-African summit took place in the Indonesian city of Bandung in 1955. It was attended by renowned world leaders, including Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, Indonesian President Sukarno, and Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai. The participants championed anti-colonialism as well as the principles of peaceful coexistence and also confirmed the solidarity of third world nations. With this year marking the 60th anniversary of the historical Bandung Summit, the participating nations find themselves in a dramatically changed environment. Asia has strengthened its role as the growth engine of the global economy, while Africa has been dubbed a continent of hope on account of its growth potential. With the Cold War now a thing of the past, and with many of the participating nations seen as emerging economies, Indonesian President Joko Widodo called for reform in the international financial order formulated by the US and Europe after World War II.
The idea that global economic problems can still be solved through the World Bank, the IMF, and the ADB is obsolete. We need to build a new international economic order that is also open to new emerging economies.
Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke next. He stressed the need to reinvent the international order. He referred to his new Silk Road's vision of achieving coexistence and co-prosperity by linking Asia and Europe by land and sea. Xi also spoke about utilizing China's proposed Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB.
China will work with all parties in the building of the Silk Road economic belt and the 21st century maritime Silk Road. Together, we'll launch the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and make proper use of the Silk Road Fund. We'll continue to support South-South cooperation.
The summit meeting will continue until Thursday. The leaders will be discussing ways to eliminate poverty and wealth disparity, which remain rampant in both continents. Measures against terrorism will also be on the agenda. On Friday, the leaders are scheduled to attend a ceremony marking the 60th anniversary of the Asian-African Summit. It'll be held in Bandung, where the summit was first held. NHK World will keep you updated on the summit every day until Friday. I'm Roslinda Bavalia in Jakarta.
Leaders and other representatives from more than 80 Asian and African countries have ended a two-day meeting in Indonesia. Rosalind de Bavalia has more from Jakarta.
Indonesian President Joko Widodo has given a closing address. The participants have adopted a joint statement and declarations. The leaders agreed to work together to boost trade and investment in Asia and Africa. The statement and declarations include a pledge to bolster collaboration to tackle terrorists, including Islamic State insurgents. The leaders have also promised to increase cooperation to eliminate poverty and economic disparity.
We will pursue a fair multilateral trading system which is pro-growth and inclusive, and which will contribute to growth.
The summit marks the 60th anniversary of the Bandung Conference. The participants at the 1955 meeting opposed colonialism and called for unity among developing countries. Asian and African nations now face vastly different circumstances. Asia is growing in importance as an engine of the global economy, and Africa is drawing attention for its growth potential. The leaders at the summit called for change in the international order. China made its presence felt. President Xi Jinping voiced his country's readiness to contribute to the development of Asia and Africa. He said China will do this by creating a massive framework for multinational economic development and through the proposed Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai was one of the key figures at the first Asian-African summit. He worked with Indonesian President Sukarno and Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru at the Bandung Conference in 1955. China has shown its leadership in Asia and Africa in the 60 years since the Bandung meeting. President Xi made the most of this historical outcome at the Asian-African Summit. NHK World's Naoki Makita reports on Beijing's ambitions in foreign affairs.
China will proceed with the development of the One Belt, One Road initiative with countries involved, as well as the establishment of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank.
Recently, China managed to gather as many as 57 founding countries to launch the AIIB. For President Xi, the Asia-Africa Summit was an opportunity to show his enthusiasm for the creation of a new world order.
Developed nations should maintain and develop an open global economy, build a fair, just, and tolerant international financial system, and create an environment that is conducive to the growth of developing countries.
The statement indicates China's strong dissatisfaction with the global financial order that continues to be dominated by the IMF and the World Bank, both led by the US. The nation's influence has been repressed, despite its status as an economic giant. The main focus of President Xi's diplomacy is One Belt, One Road. This initiative involves the creation of an economic belt spanning from China to Europe. It aims to create mutual benefits among the nations in the bloc by promoting their development. President Xi visited Pakistan earlier this week ahead of the conference. He met with the Pakistani Prime Minister to discuss the establishment of an economic corridor that will stretch from southwestern Pakistan to western China. They agreed that China would help build infrastructure along the corridor like roads, railroads, and power plants. This project is considered the flagship of the One Belt, One Road initiative. An expert on Chinese diplomacy points out that President Xi wants to dispel the idea that the nation's emergence as a great political and military presence will threaten world peace.
President Xi Jinping tried to calm down this concern. With coming the so-called AIIB and the One Belt, One Road strategy, definitely China will strengthen the economic tie with many countries. And this strengthened economic tie will help those countries finally become the strategic partnership with China. Then we can reach the goal set by President Xi Jinping to have a so-called global partnership network.
Despite emphasizing mutual harmony and benefit, China has been causing major friction with its neighboring countries over territorial rights in the South China Sea and other issues. Some participants in the Asia-Africa Conference alluded to such matters.
In Asia, there are nations that are dealing with territorial rights issues on land and sea, as well as serious armed conflicts.
In order for China to truly lead Asia and Africa, it must answer to the concerns of the international community. Naoki Makita, NHK World.
China was one of the leading countries at the Bandung conference that called for equality and peaceful coexistence. But China's situation has drastically changed. The nation is now second only to the United States in economic size and military spending. China is facing the question of whether it can be a reliable power as it tries to build international confidence. The summit leaders will travel to Bandung in West Java province on Friday. They will attend a ceremony to mark the 60th anniversary of the Bandung conference. NHK World will bring you updates on Friday. I'm Roslinda Bavalia in Jakarta.
The Indonesian city of Bandung has held a ceremony to mark the 60th anniversary of the Asian African Conference. In 1955, leaders from the two continents gathered in Bandung to pledge unity among developing nations. Rosalind de Bavalia reports from Bandung in the province of West Java.
I'm standing near the Gedung Merdeka, that's the name of the building, where the first Asian African Conference was held in April 1955. The name translates as the Building of Independence. It now serves as a museum. The building is a symbol of the people in Indonesia and other third world countries who shook off colonial rule and won independence.
This is the first intercontinental conference of colored peoples in the history of mankind.
The conference was attended by the leaders of 29 countries, including Indonesian President Sukarno and Chinese Prime Minister Zhou Enlai. The conference was held at the height of the Cold War and gave rise to the non-aligned movement. 60 years ago, Asian and African leaders walked from the hotel where they were staying to the Gedung Merdeka. Present-day leaders repeated the historic walk along the same route on Friday. The day before, the Asian African Summit wrapped up. The leaders adopted a statement and declarations. Among the pledges they made is strengthening economic cooperation among developing nations to eliminate poverty and economic disparity. Indonesian President Joko Widodo and Chinese President Xi Jinping and Swaziland's King Moswati III signed the documents. President Joko stressed the need to harness the spirit of the historic Bandung Conference for the benefit of today's world.
Kita harus bahu-membahu supaya
we in Asia and Africa have to work hand in hand to catch up with developed nations. Let's inherit the achievements our forerunners made at the first conference.
Many citizens here know that Indonesia was a key organizer of the original Bandung Conference in April of 1955. They see it as one of the great achievements of their country. Today, the whole city of Bandung seems committed to passing on the memory of the historic event to future generations. This is Asia-Africa Street in Bandung, a city about 150 kilometers southeast of the capital, Jakarta. The street was named in honor of the conference that was held 60 years ago. The street is lined with reminders of the world leaders who visited the city for the conference. People from across the country and from abroad came here ahead of the anniversary ceremony.
This is a historic moment, so I brought my children here and took some pictures.
This is the hotel where many state leaders stayed during the conference. To this day, the hotel treasures the guest book from that time. It includes the signatures of former leaders, Chinese Prime Minister Zhou Enlai, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, and many others.
The layout remains the same, and the benefit for this our hotel is, of course, we are very proud, to serve all the VVIP around the world here.
This is where the Asia-Africa Conference took place 60 years ago. The venue has been preserved as a commemorative museum to let visitors observe the atmosphere at that time. The museum maintains the conference hall just the way it was, including the chairs and the floor. This is where the leaders of Asian and African countries confirmed the solidarity of the Third World. they pledged to maintain neutrality between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. They also adopted the 10 Principles for Peace, with the aim of promoting peace, coexistence, and independence. I met with Paul Tejasuriya. He was a 25-year-old freelance photojournalist when he documented the conference. He took hundreds of photos that showed prominent political figures and their Indonesian hosts. Today, he recalls the excitement that filled the city at the time.
The delegates wore state uniforms. They all looked very enthusiastic. Some of the most impressive figures I remember were Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser and Chinese Prime Minister Zhou Enlai. They made what became a historic walk to the conference venue. Citizens were standing by the road and cheering as the delegates passed by.
Indonesian President Sukarno worked to bring together 29 state leaders. Paul remembers the leaders' charisma.
The most impressive moment was President Sukarno's speech. It was very inspirational for all delegates. I was very happy to be able to meet people from around the world, and I'm proud to have been part of a historic moment.
An exhibition of his photos was held 60 years after they were taken. Young photographers have prepared the publication of a book. Many people came to the event, celebrating the publication.
As someone originally from Bandung, I'm proud to say that the city was part of an important moment in history.
I'm happy to see many younger people came to see the photos. I hope this book can be the motivation for them.
60 years after the historic meeting in Bandung, people's memories have not faded one bit, and they are working to ensure those memories continue into the future. The inaugural conference had a major impact on global affairs, and it had a huge effect into the late 20th century when more nations gained independence. Asian and African countries now find themselves in a political environment vastly different from that of 60 years ago. Asia is drawing attention for its role as the growth engine of the global economy, while Africa has been dubbed the continent of hope. On Wednesday, Indonesian President Joko made an opening speech at the Asian-African Summit. He addressed the belief that global economic problems can still be solved through the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the Asian Development Bank. He called that idea obsolete. China's President Xi Jinping spoke about a multinational economic cooperation framework to promote large-scale infrastructure projects for the entire Asian region. He emphasized the importance of establishing China's proposed Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB. The latest conference comes in the year when people are also marking the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. Even after so many years, Indonesian President Joko admits that many countries in Asia and Africa are still plagued by poverty.
I think what the ASEAN African countries needs to do is to break down all these big visions of the leaders in this conference. If these Asian African countries can move forward by creating a more bilateral approach among themselves, frame in the spirit of Bandung, that would be beneficial.
The gathering helped underline the developing nation's devotion to reforming the international order and working for economic growth in the two continents. Rosalind de Bavalia reporting from Bandung.